Good evening and welcome. Today we'll be reading Quotations from Chairman Mao Tse-Tung, or perhaps as others have pronounced it, Mao Zedong. It is also known colloquially in the West as the Little Red Book. Now, on a personal note, before we begin, I have recently returned from a 2-month excursion overseas to Japan, Cambodia, and China, one in which I actually crossed all the way across China from Kunming in Yunnan province through to Beijing with quite a few stops along the way, following along the coast more or less after Xi'an. The copy of the text in question I picked up for 20 RMB at a little local stall in the Muslim quarter in Xi'an. Now, of course, I probably could have gotten it for far less, but these are the value placed in the market on these words. Now, I must say, first off, communism in China is not what Mao would have had in mind today. It's a, frankly, state capitalist paradise that has abandoned the values that Mao upheld in favor of something else entirely, something that's far more its own thing. It's not communism, but it's not Western free market capitalism either in the true sense. It's its own enigma. And I wish them all the best as they look forward and rise to become the world's superpower in the 21st century. Well, now, with that said, despite how utterly incorrect Marxism is in all its basic tenets, the fact remains that as the inspiration for some of the greatest dictators and military leaders in history, understanding how they wish to display their thinking. It may not even be fully what they believe, but it's what they want their followers to think that they believe. And understanding that, what could drive a man like Mao to commit a genocide against 30 million of his own citizens. There is something to be learned there. And so on that basis, we shall learn what the enemies of freedom propose to be all about. Now then, on the first several pages, actually, let's begin with the cover. On the cover of the text, we have a sticker of Mao with Mao's face on it in party uniform, surrounded by a halo. Definitely a cult of personality there. In below the halo, you have what looks to be possibly a ship. It looks like a ship on the sea. And Mao is the star that they are following, the North Star. Below that, it reads, Quotations from Chairman Mao Tse-Tung. For the first several pages, we have propaganda photos of Mao in various situations. Some are just him posing in a variety of uniforms. One appears to show him sort of laughing as he gets off a plane and he's smoking a cigarette. Another one is him in like a African savannah-style hat. Another one here, he's smiling and sort of locking his fingers together gleefully. Another one, he's standing in front of a building that has a Star of David in the window. No explanation given for the context of these photos, but I digress. Another one is him smiling, holding a pamphlet, and sipping a coffee as he stands at a podium for a speech to the party. Here is another in which he's presumably congratulating the troops on a job well done, and holding up a peace sign, but it's angled rather poorly. Another time he's in normal clothing with what looks to be his family, but it is impossible to tell from it. There's no real caption of any sort. Another is him dressed as a farmer, and you can clearly tell that it's a movie set or something. They have corn in the front and what looks like a green screen in behind. Another one here is the chairman walking along the ground. Again, his hands behind his back. Pictures of the chairman in what looks to be a U.S. Army Jeep, and he's standing in front of a bunch of artillery batteries. Another of him giving a speech. And lastly, one of the chairmen in his old age, standing in front of a traditional-style building, smiling and marveling at the success of his great works, or purported success. Now, contents of this document. Chapter 1, page 1, and beginning on page 1, the Communist Party. Chapter 2, beginning on page 8, classes and class struggle. Chapter 3, beginning on page 23, socialism and communism. Chapter 4, beginning on page 45, the correct handling of contradictions amongst the people. Chapter 5, beginning on page 58, war and peace. Chapter 6, beginning on page 72, imperialism and all reactionaries are paper tigers. Chapter 8, beginning on page 82, dare to struggle and dare to win. Chapter 9, beginning on page 88, the People's War. Chapter 10, beginning on page 99, the People's Army. Chapter 11, beginning on page 104, leadership of party committees. Chapter 12, beginning on page 118, the mass line. Chapter 13, beginning on page 134, political work. Chapter 14, beginning on page 148, relations between officers and men. And bear in mind, all of these are actually written in Roman numerals, so I may have the chapter numbers wrong. I hope I have this right. Let me see here. Here we go. Chapter 14, beginning on page 153, relations between the army and the people. Chapter 15, on page 157, democracy in the three main fields. Chapter 16, beginning on page 165, education and the training of troops. Chapter 17, beginning on page 170, serving the people. Chapter 18, beginning on page 175, patriotism and internationalism. Chapter, I think it was 17, beginning on page 181, revolutionary heroism. Chapter 18, and that's Roman numeral XX, beginning on page 186, building our country through diligence and frugality. Chapter 19, Roman numeral XXI, beginning on page 194, self-reliance and arduous struggle. Chapter 20, beginning on page 203, methods of thinking and methods of work. Chapter 21, beginning on page 230, investigation and study. Chapter 21, beginning on page 237, ideological self-cultivation. Chapter 22, I think it was, on page 251, unity. Chapter 23, page 254, discipline. Chapter 24, that's Roman numeral XXVII, on page 258, criticism and self-criticism. I've lost count at this point. Roman numeral XXVIII, on page 268, communists. XXIX on page 276, cadres. XXX is the chapter number, and it's on page 288, entitled Youth. XXXI on page 294, Women. XXXII on page 299, Culture and Art. XXXIII on page 304, Study. Now bear in mind, depending on the year this was printed, not all of these quotes will exist, because there are doubtless other editions of this text that are far longer. But suffice it to say, this is likely more than enough to get a glimpse into what Mao wanted his people to believe that he believed, whether that was the truth or not. Now, we have a note here from the original translator, who converted this text from the original Chinese into English. Unless otherwise stated, the page numbers given for the source of a quotation refer to the first English edition of the book or pamphlet cited as published by the Foreign Languages Press, Peking, and Peking is the original old name for Beijing. In cases where a word or phrase linked to the preceding text has been omitted in the opening sentence of the quotation, an asterisk is placed after the source. This is also done in a number of places where the English rendering has been reworded to make up for an omission of context or to improve the translation. Note from the translator. We begin. Chapter 1. The Communist Party. The force at the core leading our cause forward is the Chinese Communist Party. The theoretical basis guiding our thinking is Marxist-Leninism. Quotation from the opening address at the first session of the First National People's Congress of the People's Republic of China on September 15th, 1954. Second, if there is to be revolution, there must be a revolutionary party. Without a revolutionary party, without a party built on the Marxist-Leninist revolutionary theory and in the Marxist-Leninist revolutionary style, it is impossible to lead the working class and the broad masses of the people in defeating imperialism and its running dogs. Quotation from the Revolutionary Forces of the World Unite, Fight Against Imperialist Aggression Conference, I'm guessing, November 1948. Selected Works, Volume IV, so that I think that's 4. Again, my Roman numeral knowledge is not the greatest. Page 284. Without the efforts of the Chinese Communist Party, without the Chinese Communists as the mainstay of the Chinese people, China can never achieve independence and liberation, or industrialization and the modernization of her agriculture. Quotation from On Coalition Government, April 24th, 1945. Selected Works, Volume 3, page 318. The Chinese Communist Party is the core of leadership of the whole Chinese people. Without this core, the cause of socialism cannot be victorious. Quotation from a talk at the General Reception for the Delegates to the Third National Congress of the New Democratic Youth League of China on May 25th, 1957. A well-disciplined party armed with the theory of Marxist-Leninism, using the method of self-criticism and linked with the masses of the people, an army under the leadership of such a party, a united front of all revolutionary classes and all revolutionary groups under the leadership of such a party. These are the three main weapons with which we have defeated the enemy. Quotation from On the People's Democratic Dictatorship, June 30th, 1949. Selected Works, Volume 5, I believe that's IV in Roman numerals, page 422. We must have faith in the masses, and we must have faith in the party. These are two cardinal principles. If we doubt these principles, we shall accomplish nothing. Quotation from On the Question of Agricultural Cooperation, July 31st, 1955, 3rd edition, page 7. Armed with Marxist-Leninist theory and ideology, the Communist Party of China has brought a new style of work to the Chinese people, a style of work which essentially entails integrating theory with practice, forging close links with the masses, and practicing self-criticism. Quotation from On Coalition Government, April 24th, 1945, Selected Works, Volume 3, page 314. No political party can possibly lead a great revolutionary movement to victory unless it possesses revolutionary theory and a knowledge of history and has a profound grasp of the practical movement. Quotation from The Role of the Chinese Communist Party in the National War, October 1938, Selected Works, Volume 2, page 108. As we used to say, the rectification movement is a widespread movement of Marxist education. Rectification means that the whole party studying Marxism through criticism and self-criticism. Rectification means the whole party studying Marxism through criticism and self-criticism. We can certainly learn more about Marxism in the course of the rectification movement. From a speech at the Chinese Communist Party's National Conference on Propaganda Work, March 12, 1957, First Pocket Edition, page 14. It is an arduous task to ensure a better life for the several 100 million people of China and to build our economically and culturally backward country into a prosperous and powerful one with a high level of culture. And it is precisely in order to be able to shoulder this task more competently and work better together with all non-party people who are actually by high ideals and determined to institute reforms that we must conduct rectification movements both now and in the future, and constantly rid ourselves of whatever is wrong. Ibid, pp. 15 and through 16. So that's sort of like we don't exactly know where it was in the text, but it was somewhere between chapters 15 and 16, or pages 15 and 16. Policy is the starting point of all the practical actions of a revolutionary party, and manifests itself in the process and the end results of that party's actions. A revolutionary party is carrying out a policy whenever it takes any action. If it is not carrying out a correct policy, it is carrying out a wrong policy. It is not carrying out if it is not carrying out a given policy consciously, it is doing so blindly. What we call experience is the process and the end result of carrying out a policy. Only through the practice of the people, that is, through experience, can we verify whether a policy is correct or wrong, and determine to what extent it is correct or wrong. But people's practice, especially the practice of a revolutionary party and the revolutionary masses, cannot be bound up with one policy or another. Therefore, before any action is taken, we must explain the policy, which we have formulated in the light of the given circumstances, to party members and to the masses. Otherwise, party members and the masses will depart from the guidance of our policy, act blindly, and carry out a wrong policy. Quotation from On the Policy Concerning Industry and Commerce, February 27th, 1948. Selected Works, Volume 5, pp. 204-05. Our party has laid down the general line and general policy of the Chinese Revolution, as well as various specific lines for work and specific policies. However, While many comrades remember our party's specific lines for work and specific policies, they often forget its general line and general policy. If we actually forget the party's general line and general policy, then we shall be blind, half-baked, muddle-headed revolutionaries. And when we carry out a specific line for work and a specific policy, we shall lose our bearing and vacillate now to the left, now to the right, and the work will suffer. From a speech at a conference of cadres in the Shaanxi Suiyuan liberated area, April 1st, 1948. Selected Works, Volume 4, page 238. Policy and tactics are the life-blood of the party. Leading cadres at all levels must give them full attention and must never on any account be negligent. Quotation from A Circular on the Situation, March 20th, 1948. Selected Works, Volume 4, page 230. Chapter 2 on Classes and Class Struggle will begin shortly.